You ever catch yourself mindlessly chopping vegetables at dawn and wonder what multi-billion-dollar corporation is plotting to destroy your life? No, just me? Well, let me tell you about the time Silicon Valley's hottest startup tried to bulldoze my family's legacy and learned the hard way that some traditions can't be disrupted. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. I'm Marcus, proud owner of the Golden Wok, a hole-in-the-wall Chinese restaurant that's been the heart and soul of downtown San Mateo since 1962. My grandfather started this place with nothing but a wok, a dream, and recipes passed down through generations. For 60 years, we've been serving the best dim sum in Northern California, and our regulars swear our xiaolongbao could bring world peace. Everything was business as usual until TechFlex moved in next door. You know the type: glass tower, bean, bag chairs, and enough RGB lighting to cause seizures. At first, their employees became our best customers. Turns out writing code makes you crave authentic Chinese food. Our lunch rush turned into a sea of hoodies and MacBooks, with engineers debating algorithms between bites of dumplings. But then their CEO, Blake Thompson, started showing up. Picture every Silicon Valley stereotype rolled into one. Black turtleneck, Tesla parked diagonally across two spaces, and a habit of calling everything from napkins to nuclear physics revolutionary. He'd sit in our corner booth, picking at his food, while staring around like he was mentally redecorating. I should have known something was up when he started asking weird questions. Have you considered automating your ordering system? Or, don't you think this location would make a great tech hub? But I was too busy running a restaurant to see the storm coming. One Monday morning, while I was prepping for the lunch rush, a fancy envelope appeared under our door. Inside was what they called a generous offer to buy our property for half its actual value. The letter was full of corporate buzzwords like synergy and vertical integration, but the message was clear: take the money and get out. I tossed it in the same bin where we put failed recipe experiments. The Golden Wok wasn't just some property to flip, it was where my grandfather had taught me to fold dumplings, where my father had perfected our secret sauce recipe, where I'd grown up watching 3 generations of San Mateo families celebrate their most important moments. But Blake wasn't used to hearing no. The next week, health inspectors started showing up every single day. Funny how they never visited before TechFlex moved in. Then our parking lot mysteriously got rezoned, and suddenly our regulars couldn't find spots because TechFlex's army of electric scooters took over everything. The final straw came during our busiest dim sum service of the week. Blake swaggered, in turtleneck looking extra tight, and dropped the act completely. "Look, Marcus," he said, leaning against our counter like he owned it, which, in his mind, he probably already did. "The future is coming. You can either get on board or get out of the way. Silicon Valley doesn't run on dumplings anymore." I was about to show him exactly where he could stick his future when my grandmother, Nai, emerged from the kitchen. At 85, she's 4 feet 11 inches of pure steel wrapped in a floral apron. She took one look at Blake, then turned to me and said in perfect Cantonese, "Your grandfather would have never let a man in a turtleneck tell him what to do with his legacy." She was right. TechFlex thought they could just delete us like a line of code. But they were about to learn that some things can't be disrupted, no matter how many billions you have in venture capital. I looked at Blake and smiled. "You know what, Blake? You're right about one thing. Change is coming, but not the kind you're expecting." The war for the Golden Wok was about to begin, and Silicon Valley's golden boy had no idea what he was up against. Because while Blake had his algorithms and investors, I had something much more powerful, a community that wasn't about to let another piece of their history get turned into a WeWork knockoff. The thing about running a restaurant is that you learn to read people better than any fancy AI algorithm. You can tell a lot about someone by how they treat their server, or whether they actually know how to use chopsticks properly. And watching Blake storm out of the Golden Wok that day, I could tell we'd just entered a whole new level of corporate warfare. I needed a plan, and fast. That evening after closing, I gathered our staff in the dining room. We're not just employees, we're family. There's Uncle Wei, our head chef, who's been with us for 30 years and can flip a wok with his eyes closed. Jenny, our front-of-house manager who knows every regular's order by heart and their kids' college plans. And Mike, our youngest waiter, who's putting himself through coding school by working nights. They're trying to push us out, I explained, showing them the offer letter. But I think there's more to this than just our restaurant. Mike adjusted his glasses, frowning at the letter. TechFlex has been in the news lately. They're supposedly developing some revolutionary AI-powered food delivery platform, but... He paused, looking uncertain. But what? I prompted. Well, there are rumors on tech forums that their app is basically vaporware. They're burning through venture capital money, and their real business is actually in real estate acquisition. Jenny nodded, pulling out her phone. That makes sense. Look at this. She showed us a local news article from last month. 3 other family-owned businesses in different parts of San Mateo had mysteriously closed down after health violations. All their buildings were now owned by shell companies that traced back to TechFlex's parent company. They're not just after our restaurant, Uncle Wei said quietly, his usually cheerful face serious. They want the whole block. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about all the families who'd lost their businesses to TechFlex's expansion. But then I remembered something my grandfather used to say. The best recipes aren't just about ingredients, they're about timing. The next morning, I started making calls. Our restaurant might be old school, but our customers weren't. Remember, Mike, our coding student waiter, turns out he had friends at every major tech company in the valley. Jenny, her sister works for the San Francisco Chronicle. And Uncle Wei? His mahjong group includes half the city council's spouses. I also reached out to our regulars, the real ones, not the TechFlex crowd. Mrs. Liu, who's been ordering the same dish every Sunday for 20 years, is a property lawyer. Mr. Patel, from the convenience store next door, had been fighting his own battle against corporate takeover. Even the teenagers who hung out here after school offered to help. Apparently they're pretty savvy with social media. But TechFlex struck first. Wednesday morning, health inspectors showed up again, this time with cameras from a local news station. In tow, the reporter, looking suspiciously well-prepared, shoved a microphone in my face. We've received reports of multiple health code violations at this establishment. How do you respond to allegations that the Golden Wok has failed to meet basic safety standards? I was about to respond when Nai appeared beside me, still holding her rolling pin. She smiled sweetly at the camera and said in English, "Oh, wonderful. You're just in time for our kitchen tour. Please come see how we make our award-winning dumplings. 60 years, same recipe, same kitchen. Nothing to hide here." The reporter hesitated, clearly not expecting this response. The health inspector looked even more uncomfortable, especially when Nai grabbed his arm and started leading him toward the kitchen. "You must be hungry, working so hard," she said, already pulling out plates. "My grandson says you visited 5 times this week. Such dedication. Here, try these xiaolongbao, my special recipe. The secret is in the broth." I watched in amazement as my grandmother transformed what was supposed to be an ambush into an impromptu cooking show. By the time she was done, the health inspector was asking for our business card, and the news crew was filming B-roll of her dumpling folding technique. But I knew this was just the beginning. Blake and TechFlex wouldn't give up easily, and we'd just drawn first blood in what was about to become Silicon Valley's strangest corporate battle. The question was, what would their next move be, and were we ready for it? Uncle Wei caught my eye from the kitchen and nodded. He'd already started prep for tomorrow, double the usual amount. Because in this fight, we had a secret weapon that, No startup could replicate a community built on decades of shared meals and memories. And we were about to remind Silicon Valley that some things can't be disrupted, no matter how many algorithms you throw at them. Have you ever noticed how the calm before a storm feels different from regular quiet? That's how the next few days felt at the Golden Wok. Our lunch rush was busier than ever, thanks to the local news coverage of Nai's impromptu cooking show. But Blake and his TechFlex army had gone suspiciously quiet. Too quiet. I was in the back office, going through our finances when Mike burst in, nearly knocking over my lucky cat statue. "Marcus, you need to see this." He thrust his phone in my face, showing me TechFlex's latest press release. Revolutionizing traditional cuisine, TechFlex announces AI-powered ghost kitchen initiative. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. My stomach dropped as I read further. They weren't just launching another food delivery app. They were planning to use AI to recreate beloved traditional recipes with modern efficiency. And guess which restaurant they specifically mentioned as being stuck in the past? "They're trying to copy our recipes," I said, feeling a mix of anger and disbelief. "They think they can replicate 60 years of family tradition with an algorithm?" Mike scrolled down further. "It gets worse. They're offering heritage restaurant consultations to help traditional establishments transition into the digital age. They're painting themselves as saviors of dying businesses." Before I could respond, Jenny rushed in. "Marcus, you need to come out front, now." In our dining room stood a group of suited executives, led by a woman who looked like she'd stepped out of a corporate stock photo. "I'm Sarah Mitchell, TechFlex's Director of Community Integration," she announced, holding out a glossy business card. "We're here to offer the Golden Wok an exciting partnership opportunity." I noticed Blake hovering near the door, trying to hide his smirk behind his turtleneck. Real brave, sending someone else to do his dirty work. Sarah launched into what was clearly a rehearsed pitch. "Our AI has analyzed thousands of traditional recipes. We believe we can help the Golden Wok reach a wider audience through our ghost kitchen network. Imagine your family's legacy, scaled across the entire West Coast." Scaled. Nai emerged from the kitchen, wiping her hands on her apron. "You think good food is about scale? Come, let me show you something." She led Sarah to our prep station, where Uncle Wei was making our secret sauce. "Watch," Nai commanded. "See how he knows exactly when to add each ingredient? No measuring cups, he feels it. Now tell me, can your AI feel?" Sarah shifted uncomfortably. "Our system uses precise measurements." "Precise?" Nai laughed. "Today is humid. Tomorrow might be dry. Next week, different vegetables, different strength. Every day, sauce needs different touch. You think computer knows this?" I stepped forward. "Let me be clear. Our recipes aren't for sale. They're not meant to be scaled or digitized. They're meant to be crafted by hand, served with care, and enjoyed in community." "Community is evolving," Sarah countered. "Young people want convenience, efficiency." "Oh, really?" A voice piped up from one of our tables. It was Lisa, a regular who'd been quietly eating her lunch during this whole exchange. She stood up, phone in hand. "Because I just live-streamed this whole conversation to my TikTok, and the comments seemed to disagree." I glanced at her phone. The live stream already had thousands of viewers, with comments pouring in faster than I could read them. Save the Golden Wok was trending locally. Sarah's professional demeanor cracked slightly. "This isn't about social media sentiment. This is about progress." "No," I interrupted. "This is about greed disguised as progress. You're not here to help us evolve. You're here to steal what we've spent generations building, package it in an app, and sell it back to people at a premium." The other executives were starting to look uncomfortable. One was nervously checking his phone, probably watching the social media storm brewing in real time. "We'll give you time to reconsider," Sarah said, retreating toward the door. "But remember, the future is inevitable." As they left, I noticed Blake lingering. "Nice show," he said quietly. "But do you really think social media hashtags can stop a billion-dollar company?" I met his gaze. "No, Blake. I think people who care about real food, real community, and real culture will stop you. Social media is just helping them find each other." After they left, our dining room erupted in applause. Lisa's live stream had drawn a crowd outside, with people pressing their faces against our windows, waving and giving thumbs up. But while everyone was celebrating this small victory, I couldn't shake a feeling of unease. TechFlex hadn't built their empire by giving up easily. This partnership offer was just another tactic, and I had a feeling their next move would be less friendly. That night, as I was closing up, I found an envelope that had been slipped under our door. Inside was a stack of papers, official-looking. Documents with lots of fine print, but it was the post-it note on top that made my blood run cold. "Check your lease agreement. Carefully. B. You know that moment when you realize you're in deeper trouble than you thought? That's how I felt, staring at those lease documents at 2 a.m. with cold coffee and a growing sense of dread for company. Turns out, Blake's little note wasn't just an empty threat. Our building's ownership had changed hands 6 months ago, right around the time TechFlex moved in next door. The new owner, a shell company called Innovation Properties LLC. 3 guesses who was behind that. And the first. 2, don't count. I called Mrs. Liu, our regular customer turned legal advisor, despite the ungodly hour. Thankfully, she was still up working on another case. "Send me everything," she said after I explained the situation. "And Marcus, don't sign anything if they show up tomorrow." The next morning, I gathered our staff early. Uncle Wei brought his special crisis dumplings, extra spicy because, as he says, if you're going to face trouble, might as well have your taste buds awake for it. "They own the building," I explained, passing around copies of what Mrs. Liu had found. "And there's a clause in our lease about property improvements that could let them force us out with just 30 days' notice." "But that's impossible," Jenny protested. "Your grandfather had a handshake agreement with the original owner," I finished, "but that died with Mr. Chen last year. His kids sold the building and somehow we missed the notification about the ownership change." Mike, who'd been unusually quiet, spoke up. "I think I know why we missed it." He pulled out his laptop, showing us a series of official-looking emails. "These notifications were sent to your business email, the one I helped set up last year. But look at the routing data. They were intercepted and marked as spam before they ever reached your inbox." "They've been planning this for months," Jenny realized. "The move next door, the health inspections, the ghost kitchen announcement. It was all just distraction while they set up their real play." Before we could discuss further, the morning prep team arrived. We had a restaurant to run, crisis or not. But as I watched our staff move through their familiar routines, Uncle Wei practicing his wok hei, Nai teaching a new server the proper way to fold napkins, I felt a fierce determination growing. This place wasn't just a business, it was a living, breathing piece of San Mateo's soul. Around noon, Sarah Mitchell returned, this time with a different kind of entourage, 2 lawyers and a building inspector. "We're here to discuss necessary renovations," she announced, not bothering with pleasantries this time. "The building needs significant upgrades to meet current safety standards." "Funny timing," I replied, gesturing to our packed dining room. The Doing Save the Golden Wok movement had brought in more customers than ever. We just passed a health inspection last week. "This isn't about health code," one of the lawyers stepped forward. "The building requires seismic retrofitting, electrical upgrades, and modernization of all facilities." As your lease clearly states. Actually, a voice cut in, let's talk about that lease. Mrs. Liu stood up from her regular table, legal briefcase in hand. Because I have some questions about Innovation Properties LLC and its rather interesting corporate structure. The lawyer faltered slightly. And you are? Helen Liu, Real Estate Law. I find it fascinating how Innovation Properties was incorporated just 3 days before purchasing this building. Even more interesting is how the purchase was funded through a series of offshore transactions that coincidentally match the pattern of TechFlex's recent property acquisitions. Sarah's professional smile tightened. The building's ownership isn't relevant to the required improvements. It's absolutely relevant, Mrs. Liu countered, especially when discussing the validity of lease terms potentially modified through digital interference. Mike chose that moment to step forward with his laptop. You mean like these emails, the ones that were mysteriously flagged as spam through a very specific set of server redirects? Because I've traced those redirects, and you really should have used better encryption. The room had gone silent. Every customer was watching the scene unfold, many with phones recording. Sarah and her team huddled together, whispered urgently, then retreated with promises to continue this discussion through proper channels. After they left, Mrs. Liu turned to me. They'll be back with a better strategy. This was just a test run. But we've got something they don't, I said, looking around at our packed restaurant. Actually, we've got a lot of things they don't. As, if on cue, Nai emerged from the kitchen with a fresh batch of her special baozi. Enough business talk, she declared. Everyone eat first. You cannot fight on empty stomach. She was right, of course, but as I watched our customers, our family, share food and stories, I realized we had stumbled onto something powerful. TechFlex might have algorithms and lawyers, but we had a community, and communities, when threatened, have a way of fighting back that no corporate strategy can predict. I just hoped it would be enough for what was coming next. Here's the thing about running a family restaurant. You learn to trust your instincts, and my instincts were screaming that TechFlex's retreat was too easy. Turns out I was right, but not in the way I expected. The next morning started normally enough. I was teaching the morning prep team my grandfather's secret dumpling folding technique when Mike rushed in, his laptop clutched like a shield. Marcus, they've gone nuclear. You need to see this. He pulled up TechFlex's latest press release, and my heart sank. The headline read, TechFlex announces Heritage Preservation Initiative, bringing endangered family recipes into the digital age. But it was the accompanying video that really twisted the knife. There was Blake, standing in what looked like a high-tech test kitchen, wearing a chef's coat instead of his usual turtleneck. Behind him, robotic arms were folding dumplings with mechanical precision. For too long, we've watched beloved family restaurants disappear, Blake said to the camera, his voice dripping with fake concern. Their recipes, their traditions, lost forever. But what if we could preserve these cultural treasures digitally? Today, we're proud to announce that our AI has successfully recreated several lost recipes from San Mateo's restaurant scene. The AI camera panned to a series of dishes that looked eerily familiar. Using advanced machine learning and molecular gastronomy, we've revived classics like the Golden Palace's legendary xiaolongbao. Golden Palace, Uncle Wei exclaimed. They're using our recipes but changed the name. Jenny, who'd been watching, over my shoulder, grabbed her phone. It's trending already. Preserve Our Heritage is blowing up and people are actually buying their story. I was about to respond when Nai cleared her throat. She'd been unusually quiet, watching the video with narrowed eyes. Bring me one of their dumplings, she said finally. What? Nai, we can't trust your grandmother. She patted my cheek. Sometimes, to win fight, you must taste enemies' cooking. So that's how I found myself standing in line at TechFlex's pop-up Heritage Kitchen an hour later. The place was packed with influencers taking photos of robot-made dumplings served on LED-lit plates. Each table had a QR code that played a holographic story about the dish's preserved heritage. I ordered their xiaolongbao and brought it back to the Golden Wok, where Nai was waiting with our entire kitchen staff. She took one look at the perfectly uniformed dumpling and snorted. "Too perfect," she declared. "No soul." But she took a bite anyway, then smiled in a way that made me nervous. Just as I thought. They made same mistake everyone makes first time. She gathered us all around our prep station. "Watch," she commanded, pulling out ingredients. "Real xiaolongbao, soup inside must dance, like tiny ocean in silk bag. Their soup." She poked the TechFlex dumpling, watching the liquid ooze out. "Dead water, no dance. But their marketing," Jenny started. "Marketing cannot teach what 3 generations learn," Nai interrupted. "They copy shape, not heart. Now we show them difference." What happened next was pure Nai brilliance. She went live on Jenny's TikTok, doing something we'd never allowed before, showing parts of our dumpling-making process, not the secret ingredients or techniques, but the human elements. How the dough feels different on humid days. The way you know the filling is perfect by sound, not measurement. The slight imperfections that make each dumpling unique. "Every dumpling tells story," she explained to the camera. "Some wrinkled like grandfather's smile, some plump like babies. Cheek, all different, all perfect in own way. Machine cannot make memory, cannot make love." The video exploded. Within hours, food critics and influencers were posting side-by-side comparisons. "Soulless versus soulful," one viral post declared, showing TechFlex's uniform dumplings next to our distinctly handcrafted ones. But we didn't have long to celebrate. That evening, as we were closing up, Blake himself walked in. He ditched the chef's coat and was back in his signature turtleneck. "Cute stunt," he said, dropping a thick envelope on the counter. "But while you were playing social media, chef, we were busy too. Those recipes you're so proud of, we just filed patents on their digital recreations. Every aspect, from fold pattern to filling ratio, all proprietary TechFlex technology now." He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "So here's the deal. Either you license your own family recipes back from us, or we sue you for patent infringement. Your choice." As he turned to leave, he paused at the door. "Oh, and you have 48 hours to decide." TikTok, 48 hours. That's how long we had to decide whether to license our own family recipes back from a tech company that had never touched a wok until last week. The irony would be hilarious if it wasn't so infuriating. Called an emergency meeting at Mrs. Liu's office first thing in the morning. Her law firm's conference room quickly filled with our unlikely war counsel. Mrs. Liu herself, surrounded by patent law books, Mike with his laptop running code analyses, Jenny monitoring social media reactions, and Uncle Wei, who insisted on bringing stress relief dumplings for everyone. "What they're doing shouldn't be legal," I said, pacing the room. "They're basically trying to patent our heritage." Mrs. Liu adjusted her glasses, frowning at a thick legal document. "Unfortunately, they're exploiting a loophole in patent law. They're not patenting the recipes themselves. They're patenting their AI's specific method of recreating them." "But we've been making these dishes for generations," Uncle Wei protested. "How can they claim ownership?" "Because they're not claiming the traditional methods," Mike explained, turning his laptop around to show us diagrams from TechFlex's patent applications. "They're patenting the exact measurements, temperatures, and techniques their AI uses to replicate our results. It's like they're copywriting a specific translation of a classic book." Jenny looked up from her phone. "It's getting worse. TechFlex is pushing this narrative hard on social media. They're painting themselves as preservationists, saving dying culinary traditions through technology. Some food bloggers are actually praising them." I slumped into a chair, feeling the weight of 3 generations of family history on my shoulders. So what are our options? Mrs. Liu laid out 3 possibilities, none of them good. 1. We license our own recipes back from them, which sets a terrible precedent. 2. We fight the patents in court, which could take years and cost a fortune. 3. We change our recipes enough to avoid the patents, but that means losing our traditional methods. The room fell silent, broken only by the sound of Uncle Wei stress-eating his own dumplings. Then my phone buzzed. A message from Nai. Come home now. Bring everyone. We found her in the kitchen, but she wasn't alone. With her was an elderly man I'd never seen before, carefully examining our oldest wok with tears in his eyes. Marcus, Nai said, beaming. Meet Master Zhang. He taught your grandfather how to cook 60 years ago. The old man looked up, smiling. Ah, little Wong's grandson. Your grandfather was my best student. Always asking questions, always wanting to know why, not just how. I looked at Nai, confused. How did you? While you play lawyer games, I make phone calls, she said smugly. Community remembers, even if computers don't. Master Zhang ran his hand along the wok's edge. Your grandfather spent 10 years learning just 5 dishes, not because he was slow, because he wanted to understand the soul of each one. These tech people, they think recipe is like mathematics. Add this, subtract that, multiply by money. He shook his head. But real cooking is like jazz. You must know rules perfectly before you can break them beautifully. Mike's eyes widened. That's it. Their patents are based on exact measurements and procedures, but traditional Chinese cooking never measures. Uncle Wei finished excitedly. We feel, we adjust, we respond to ingredients. Mrs. Liu was already flipping through the patent documents. If we can prove these dishes require human judgment and adaptation, that they can't be reduced to fixed formulas, then their patents only cover their specific AI method, Jenny caught on. Not the traditional way of cooking, Master Zhang nodded approvingly. Good, you understand. Now gather around. Today we document real heritage. For the next several hours, Master Zhang shared stories and demonstrated techniques that had never been written down. He showed how the same dish could be made 10 different ways depending on the ingredient's mood. Yes, ingredients have moods, he insisted. He explained how weather affected cooking times, how the sound of hot oil told you its temperature, how the wok's color showed its readiness. Jenny recorded everything, while Mike took notes on the variables that would be impossible for an AI to standardize. Mrs. Liu watched with growing excitement, already planning our legal strategy. But it was what Master Zhang said next that really changed the game. Your grandfather wasn't just my student, he revealed, pulling out an aged leather notebook. He was my partner in documenting our region's dying recipes. This book contains techniques and dishes that haven't been cooked in 50 years. Not because they were lost, because they were waiting for the right moment to be reborn. He smiled at me. Perhaps that moment is now. Master Zhang's notebook wasn't just a collection of recipes, it was a time capsule. As we carefully turned its weathered pages, decades of culinary history unfolded before us. Each recipe told a story, not just of ingredients and techniques, but of the people who created them, the occasions they celebrated, the traditions they preserved. Look at this, Master Zhang said, pointing to a faded entry. 8 treasure duck, last made for Emperor Puyi's wedding in 1922. Recipe traveled through 4 generations of palace chefs before reaching your grandfather. Jenny was live-streaming the moment, her phone capturing the awe on our faces as Master Zhang revealed one lost treasure after another. The comments section exploded with viewers from around the world, many sharing their own family's lost recipe stories. But it was Mike who spotted something that changed everything. Wait, he said, squinting at his laptop screen, then back at the notebook. These patterns, they're not just recipes. Look at how the ingredients are grouped, how the techniques flow. It's like code, but for cooking. Master Zhang smiled mysteriously. Your grandfather and I, we knew someday machines might try to copy our art. So we created something they could never replicate, a cooking system that requires human intuition. Each recipe adapts to the chef's understanding of balance, timing, and harmony. Mrs. Liu leaned forward, her legal mind racing. So these aren't just individual recipes, they're part of an interconnected culinary system? Exactly, Master Zhang nodded. Like notes in symphony, each dish connects to others, influences them. Change one element, entire system responds. No computer can predict this dance. We were so absorbed in this revelation that we almost missed the commotion outside. Almost. The sound of car doors slamming jolted us back to reality. Through the restaurant's windows, we could see a fleet of sleek, black vehicles pulling up. Out stepped Blake, Sarah, and a team of what looked like corporate executives in expensive suits. "Time's up," Blake announced as they strode in, his voice dripping with artificial sympathy. "Have you made your decision about the licensing agreement?" But before I could respond, Master Zhang stepped forward, still holding his notebook. "Ah, the digital chef himself. Tell me, young man, does your AI know the sound of perfect wok hei?" Blake blinked, thrown off script. "I'm sorry, what?" "Wok hei, the breath of the wok," Master Zhang explained, moving toward our kitchen. "The moment when metal, heat, and ingredients sing together. Come, I show you." To everyone's surprise, he grabbed a wok and in one fluid motion sent it spinning over the flame. The metal rang out with a clear, bell-like tone. This sound means wok ready for oil. Different sound. He demonstrated another movement, producing a different note. Means ready for vegetables. Every wok has own voice. Every ingredient has own song. Your machines, they know this music. Sarah stepped forward, clearly trying to regain control of the situation. Our AI can precisely control temperature and timing. "Ah, but can it feel?" Master Zhang challenged. He gestured to the notebook. "These recipes? They are not just instructions. They are conversations between chef, ingredients, and history. Each one changes based on moon phase, humidity, even chef's mood." "That's ridiculous," Blake scoffed. "Cooking is chemistry. It can be quantified, standardized." "Then quantify this," Nai interrupted. She had quietly begun cooking while Master Zhang spoke, and now the air was filled with an aroma that made everyone, even the TechFlex executives, involuntarily lean forward. Master Zhang smiled. "Smell that? That is dish from page 43. But smell different from last time, yes? Because today's ginger more fierce, so other ingredients must dance differently to maintain harmony." "We're not here to discuss cooking philosophy," Blake snapped, but I noticed some of his executives exchanging uncertain glances. "We're here about patent rights." "Interesting you mention rights," Mrs. Liu spoke up, her voice calm but carrying. "Because what you're trying to patent isn't just a process. It's an oversimplified copy of one small part of a much larger, much older system. A system that, as it happens, was documented and dated decades ago in this very notebook." Mike had been quietly typing away and now turned his screen toward us. "And I just found something interesting in TechFlex's patent applications. Their AI's revolutionary cooking algorithms. They're trying to reproduce patterns that already exist in Master Zhang's system, but they're missing half the variables. It's like they're trying to play a symphony by only reading every other note." The energy in the room shifted. One of the executives whispered something to Blake, who was starting to look less confident. "This isn't over," he warned, but his voice lacked its usual certainty. "We'll see you in court." As they filed out, Master Zhang called after them, "Come back when ready to learn real cooking. Kitchen always open to humble students." After they left, we all let out a collective breath. But Master Zhang wasn't finished with surprises. "Now," he said, opening his notebook to a new page, "let me show you what your grandfather and I created for days like this. Dishes that reveal their secrets only to those who know how to listen. You know that moment when you think you finally got the upper hand, and then life throws you a curveball? Well, the morning after our showdown with Blake and his TechFlex army, we learned what their real game was. And it was worse than we imagined. I was in the kitchen with Master Zhang, learning about a mysterious dish called Emperor's Breath from his notebook, when Mike burst in, his laptop clutched to his chest like it contained nuclear launch codes. "They're not just after our recipes," he gasped, catching his breath. "They're trying to patent the entire concept of AI-powered traditional cooking. I found their full patent filing. It's massive. They want to own the rights to any computer-assisted reproduction of heritage recipes, any of them, worldwide." Master Zhang's hands stilled over the wok. "Ah," he said softly, "so the snake shows its true length." Before we could process this, Jenny rushed in with her own bombshell. "They're launching pop-up heritage kitchen locations in every Chinatown on the West Coast. They're calling it Operation Preserve. They've got investors, celebrity chefs, even some cultural organizations backing them." Uncle Wei, who'd been quietly preparing dough, spoke up. "But their food has no soul. Anyone who tastes it will know." "That's just it," Jenny said, scrolling through her phone. "They're not trying to make it exactly the same. They're marketing it as Traditional Cuisine 2.0. Purposely different, supposedly better. Listen to this press release. "By liberating heritage recipes from human inconsistency, we're ensuring these cultural treasures survive in their most perfect form." "Perfect form?" Nai scoffed from her corner. "They think perfection means making everything same. Nature does not make two leaves exactly same. Why should dumplings all be twins?" But it was what happened next that really showed us what we were up against. A group of food critics and influencers showed up at our door, led by none other than Sarah from TechFlex, all carrying tablets showing 3D models of our dishes. "We're here for a taste test," Sarah announced, her corporate smile firmly in place. Live-streamed, of course. Traditional versus enhanced heritage cuisine. Let the public decide which version deserves to survive. I was about to show them the door when Master Zhang placed a hand on my shoulder. "Let them taste," he said calmly. "Truth reveals itself through chopsticks better than through words." What followed was the strangest cooking competition I've ever been part of. On one side, TechFlex had set up a portable, smart kitchen right outside our restaurant, complete with robotic arms and AI-guided temperature controls. On the other side, we had our traditional kitchen, 3 generations of experience, and Master Zhang's mysterious notebook, The Challenge. Create the same 3 dishes: xiaolongbao, Cantonese roast duck, and a classic mapo tofu. The TechFlex system worked with incredible precision. Each dumpling was identical, each slice of duck mathematically perfect, each cube of tofu uniform. The critics oohed and ahed at the consistency, the efficiency, the modernization of tradition. But then came our turn. Master Zhang didn't just cook, he conducted a symphony. He showed how each dumpling's slight variations in folding created different textures in the soup inside. He demonstrated how the duck's cooking time changed based on the humidity in the air. For the mapo tofu, he had me closing my eyes and listening to the sound of the oil to know when to add the next ingredient. "In traditional cooking," he explained, "to the cameras, imperfection is not mistake, it is signature, like human fingerprint. No 2 meals exactly same because no 2 moments exactly same." The critics were skeptical at first. One of them, a famous food blogger, actually pulled out a ruler to measure the consistency of our dumpling folds. But then came the tasting. What happened next went viral so fast that TechFlex's PR team couldn't contain it. The food blogger took one bite of our xiaolongbao and burst into tears. "It tastes like my grandmother's kitchen," she sobbed into her phone camera. Not just the flavor, the feeling. Others had similar reactions. One critic described our duck as a story in each bite. Another said the mapo tofu feels like it's cooking differently for each person, somehow knowing what they need. Sarah tried to steer the conversation back to consistency and efficiency, but Master Zhang wasn't having it. You try to capture lightning in bottle, he told her. But real cooking is not about capturing, it is about creating. Each meal is performance, not playback. The live stream comments exploded, and real food has fingerprints started trending. People began sharing stories of their own families' cooking traditions, the beautiful imperfections that made each dish special. But just as we thought we'd won this round, Blake appeared at the back of the crowd, smirking. He waited until the critics had left, then dropped his bomb. Touching performance, he said. Really, I mean it. Perfect timing too, right before the International Patent Office makes their preliminary ruling, tomorrow morning. Oh, did we forget to mention that part? Have you ever noticed how time seems to slow down when you're waiting for bad news? That night was the longest of my life. None of us could sleep, so we did what food people do when we're stressed. We cooked. By sunrise, our kitchen looked like we'd catered a wedding. Uncle Wei had stress-made enough dumplings to feed a small army. Jenny turned her anxiety into 5 different types of bao. Even Mike, who usually just handles our tech, managed to produce a surprisingly decent batch of scallion pancakes. Master Zhang watched us all with quiet amusement, occasionally adjusting a flame here, suggesting a pinch of spice there. Worst enemy of good cooking is worried heart, he said, though he didn't stop us. But sometimes worried heart needs busy hands. At exactly 9 a.m., Mrs. Liu called. Her voice was tense. Turn on the business news, now. We huddled around Mike's laptop, just in time to see Blake walking out of the patent office, looking like a cat who'd just eaten every canary in the pet shop. The headlines scrolling beneath him made my stomach drop. TechFlex granted preliminary approval for AI culinary. Heritage patents. The future of food preservation begins today, Blake announced to the cameras, his turtleneck looking extra smug. Our AI system can now protect and perfect traditional recipes that might otherwise be lost to time. We're not just saving these dishes, we're optimizing them. But it was what he said next that really turned my blood cold, and we're excited to announce our first major partnership. Golden Palace Restaurant Group has licensed our technology to enhance their entire menu. Their 50 locations across America will now serve AI-optimized versions of classic dishes, ensuring perfect consistency every time. Golden Palace? Uncle Wei sputtered. But that's my cousin David's chain. I finished numbly. The same. Cousin who'd been trying to buy out the Golden Wok for years, convinced that modernization was the only way forward. The news kept getting worse. The patent approval meant that any restaurant using computer-assisted cooking methods for traditional recipes would need to license TechFlex's technology. They'd basically created a toll booth between tradition and innovation. But then Master Zhang did something unexpected. He started laughing, not a polite chuckle, deep, shoulder-shaking laughter that made him have to sit down. We all stared at him like he'd finally cracked under pressure. Ah, these young people, he wheezed, wiping his eyes. So clever they outsmart themselves. Quick, bring me that special wok, the one with the dragon pattern. The wok he wanted was ancient, past, down through my family for generations. As I brought it to him, he turned it over, pointing to marks on the bottom we'd always assumed were just scratches. Look closely, he said. What do you see? Mike adjusted his glasses, peering at the marks. They look like some kind of code. Not code, Master Zhang corrected. Patent numbers from 1947. Your grandfather and we did not just document recipes, we protected them. The old way. Mrs. Liu nearly dropped her phone. Are you saying every major technique in that notebook? Master Zhang nodded. Every key principle of what they call heritage cooking optimization, we patented them. not to restrict use, but to keep them in public domain, to prevent exactly this type of seizure. The room erupted in chaos. Jenny was already live streaming the revelation. Mike was diving into patent databases. Mrs. Liu was firing rapid questions at Master Zhang about documentation. But Blake, it turned out, had one more trick up his turtlenecked sleeve. While we were celebrating, TechFlex's lawyers had been busy. They filed an emergency motion claiming our patents were invalid due to lack of technical specificity and failure to meet modern documentation standards. The real gut punch. The hearing was set for next week, and they'd brought in a judge known for favoring tech companies in patent disputes. They're trying to erase 70 years of protection in 7 days, Mrs. Liu explained grimly, and with their resources, they might succeed. I'd looked around our kitchen, at the mountains of stress-cooked food, at my tired but determined family, at Master Zhang calmly sipping his tea like he hadn't just dropped a bombshell that could save or sink us. Then we have 7 days to prove that real cooking can't be reduced to algorithms, I said. 7 days to show the world that some patents protect more than just techniques. They protect a way of life. Master Zhang smiled, already reaching for his notebook. Good. Now you understand real fight, not just for restaurant, for soul of food itself. He opened to a page I hadn't seen before, covered in diagrams that looked both ancient and surprisingly modern. Now, he said, let me show you what your grandfather and I really invented. Ever have one of those moments when you realize your family is way more interesting than you thought? That's how I felt watching Master Zhang unfold a series of yellow diagrams that looked like they belonged in a Da Vinci notebook. Your grandfather, Master Zhang explained, carefully spreading the papers across our prep table, was not just chef, he was inventor. These drawings, they show cooking system that adapts to environment. We called it responsive cuisine theory. The diagrams were incredible, detailed illustrations showing how different cooking variables interacted, how ingredients responded to weather changes, how flavors evolved based on timing and technique. But it wasn't just theory. They'd built actual tools to demonstrate their ideas. Look at wok marks again, Master Zhang instructed. Mike, who'd been photographing everything, zoomed in on his laptop screen. What we'd thought were random scratches were actually tiny measurements. A key, sophisticated analog computer built into the very tools we used every day. Each ridge, each mark, they help chef calculate perfect adjustment for humidity, temperature, ingredient variation. No digital sensor needed, all in the touch, the feel, the sound. Mrs. Liu was practically vibrating with excitement. This is exactly what we need. They're not just patents on cooking methods, they're patents on an entire adaptive cooking system. TechFlex's AI is basically trying to replicate what you and Marcus's grandfather already invented, just with digital tools instead of analog ones. But our celebration was interrupted by an unexpected visitor, my cousin David, the Golden Palace chain owner, walking in like he owned the place already. Still doing everything the hard way, I see, he said, eyeing our ancient equipment. He'd traded our family's traditional chef's whites for a sleek business suit, looking more Silicon Valley than Szechuan. You know, Marcus, it's not too late to join the winning team. TechFlex's technology is amazing. Perfect results every time. Perfect? Nai scoffed from her cooking station. Show me robot that can smell rain coming and know to adjust sauce. Show me computer that can hear when wok says, not today, too humid for mapo tofu. David rolled his eyes. That's exactly the kind of superstition we're moving past. Look at these numbers. He pulled out his tablet, showing us graphs and charts. Our test locations using TechFlex's system have seen a 40% increase in efficiency, 30% reduction in waste, and 100% reduction in soul, Master Zhang interrupted quietly. Come, taste this. He handed David a small bowl of what looked like simple noodle soup. David hesitated, then took a sip. His eyes widened. This tastes just like soup your mother made when you had fever as child? Master Jiang smiled. Yes, because weather today exactly like that day. Bowl is same type she used, even morning light coming through window matches. All these things affect taste, affect memory, affect healing power of food. That's impossible, David whispered, but his hands were shaking slightly. You couldn't know about that soup? No, Master Jiang agreed, but Bowl knows. Ingredients. No, this is what your grandfather and I protected with our patents. Not just recipe, relationship between food, cook and person eating, something no machine can copy. David stood there, conflict clear on his face. That's when Jenny, who'd been unusually quiet, spoke up. Check your social media lately? She asked, turning her laptop around. The hashtag use soul food was trending, but not in the usual way. People were sharing stories of imperfect dishes that meant the world to them, burned edges that reminded them of Mum's loving distraction, uneven dumplings folded while learning at grandmother's table, slightly too spicy dishes that told stories of Dad's adventurous spirit. Your standardized AI food, Jenny continued. It's getting perfect scores on efficiency, but look at the emotional response ratings. People say it feels empty, like eating a memory of food instead of food itself. David's tablet chimed with an alert. His face fell as he read it. Our customer satisfaction scores, they're dropping, especially among long-time customers. They say it's not the same, that something's missing. Soul is missing, Nai said firmly. Cannot digitize soul. That's when Master Jiang did something unexpected. He walked to our recipe wall and took down the most precious photo we had, my grandfather on opening day of the Golden Wok, young and proud in his chef's whites. David, Master Jiang said gently, your grandfather was not just great chef. He was visionary. These patents, these inventions, they were not meant to control tradition. They were meant to protect it from those who would turn it into product. He pointed to the wok marks, the diagrams, the notebook. All this is your heritage too, not just Marcus's. Question is, what will you do with it? The tension in the room was thick enough to cut with a cleaver, but before David could answer, his phone rang. The caller ID read, TechFlex Legal. You know what's worse than facing down a tech giant trying to steal your family's legacy? Watching your own cousin decide whether to help them do it. David stared at his ringing phone like it might bite him, TechFlex's name flashing insistently on the screen. The silence in the kitchen was deafening. Even the usual sizzle of woks and bubble of stock pots seemed hushed, like our equipment was. Holding its breath, finally David answered, putting it on speaker. Blake's voice filled the room. David, we've got a problem. Your restaurant satisfaction scores are tanking. Social media's turning against us. We need to move up the timeline on the full AI implementation. Actually, David interrupted, his voice steadier than I'd expected, I think we need to reconsider our partnership. There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end. We have a contract, David, a very specific, very binding contract. A contract based on patent rights you might not actually own, David countered, looking at Master Jiang's diagrams spread across our prep table. Rights that might have belonged to my family all along. Your family. Blake's laugh was cold. Your cousin's running a dinosaur operation while you've built a regional empire. Don't let nostalgia cloud your business judgment. That's when David did something that made me wonder if maybe the business suit hadn't completely buried his chef's heart. He picked up a pair of chopsticks and a dumpling from the mountain of stress cooking we'd produced earlier. You know what I remember most about learning to cook, Blake? Not the recipes, the sounds. The way my grandmother could tell if I'd folded a dumpling right just by the sound it made hitting the bamboo steamer. No sensor can measure that. This is business, not a cooking show. No, this is family, David cut in, and I've been so focused on expansion that I forgot what we were expanding from. He turned to Master Zhang. The patents, the diagrams, can you prove they're authentic? That my uncle helped develop them? Master Zhang smiled and pulled out another weathered notebook. Your uncle kept very detailed records, including correspondence with patent office. Also, letters discussing system with famous chefs of time, all dated, all verified. Mrs. Liu was already flipping through the documents, her eyes widening. This is incredible. They weren't just patenting cooking methods, they were creating an entire framework for preserving culinary heritage while allowing it to evolve naturally. David. Blake's voice had turned threatening. Think very carefully about your next move. We can make things very difficult. No, Blake. I think we can make things difficult for you. David ended the call and turned to us. I'm pulling Golden Palace out of the TechFlex partnership, all 50 locations. The kitchen erupted in cheers, but we didn't have long to celebrate. Within minutes, both our phones were blowing up with news alerts. TechFlex's stock had started dropping as word of Golden Palace's withdrawal spread. Food blogs were picking up the story, because authentic over AI was trending. Then something unexpected happened. Other restaurant owners started calling, first a few, then dozens. Word had gotten out about our grandfather's patents, about the battle between soul and silicon. Restaurant owners across the country were reaching out, sharing their own stories of pressure from tech companies trying to optimize their family traditions. We're not alone, Jenny realized, scrolling through messages. This is happening everywhere. TechFlex just picked us as their test case. That's when Master Zhang cleared his throat. Time to show final secret, he said, opening his notebook to a page we hadn't seen before. Your grandfather and I, we knew this day would come. Technology versus tradition. So we created something special. Teaching system that connects old wisdom with new understanding. The diagrams he revealed looked like a bridge between worlds, traditional cooking techniques mapped to modern scientific principles, but in a way that preserved the human element, the necessity of judgment and intuition. This is not just about fighting patent, Master Zhang explained. Is about showing better way forward, not man versus machine, but man and machine working together, with respect for soul of food. David picked up one of the drawings, studying it intently. This could change everything, not just for us, but for every family restaurant facing the same pressure to automate or die. But before we could dive deeper into the diagrams, our phones buzzed again. TechFlex had just issued an emergency press release. They were accelerating their patent implementation timeline and filing injunctions against any restaurant using unlicensed culinary optimization techniques. A translation, Mrs. Liu said grimly. They're trying to force everyone to either sign up with them or stop using any form of modern kitchen technology. Even basic digital thermometers could violate their patent claims. Master Zhang remained calm, pouring tea for everyone. Good, he said, surprising us all. Now real fight begins. They try to own future. We show them future already has owners. Every family who ever passed down recipe, every chef who cooks from heart. He looked at David and me. Question is, are you ready to fight not just for your restaurant, but for all restaurants? Sometimes the biggest changes start with the smallest actions. In our case, it began with a single post on Jenny's social media, a side-by-side video comparing TechFlex's robot-made dumplings with Master Zhang, teaching a child how to fold them by hand. The caption was simple: some things can't be optimized. The video exploded overnight, not just because of the obvious difference in the food, but because of what happened when Master Zhang gently corrected the child's technique. Feel dough, he said in the video. It tells you when ready. Like how mother knows when child needs hug, no sensor for that. By morning, our phones were melting down with notifications. Restaurant owners from across the country were sharing similar videos, showing their own family techniques, their own teaching moments. Cooking with soul had gone viral, with people posting stories of learning recipes from their grandparents, of family secrets passed down through generations. But TechFlex wasn't about to let a hashtag derail their plans. They responded with their own media blitz, slick commercials showing their AI kitchen systems preserving heritage through perfect replication. Their tagline? Tradition perfected. That's when David proved he really had chosen our side. He called an emergency meeting of all Golden Palace managers and did something unprecedented. He opened their kitchens for a day of traditional cooking lessons. "We're going back to our roots," he announced in a live stream from our kitchen. "Every Golden Palace location will become a learning center where our experienced chefs will teach traditional techniques alongside modern methods. We're not rejecting technology. We're putting it in its proper place as a tool to support human wisdom, not replace it." Master Zhang watched this unfold with a knowing smile. "Now is time," he said, pulling out another set of diagrams from his seemingly endless collection. "Show them what your grandfather really created." The drawings revealed something revolutionary, a hybrid cooking system that integrated traditional methods with modern technology, but in a way that preserved the human element. Special woks with built-in analog sensors that helped chefs learn to feel temperature changes, cutting boards with subtle marks that taught knife skills through muscle memory, tools that didn't replace skill but helped develop it. "These are teaching tools," Master Zhang explained, "not for replacing chef, but for training new ones. Your grandfather understood. Future needs both old and new wisdom." Mrs. Liu was already documenting everything, preparing for the legal battle ahead, but it was Mike who spotted something crucial in the patents. "Look at this language," he said, pointing to a specific clause. "They didn't just patent the tools, they patented the entire concept of technology-assisted culinary education that preserves traditional methods. If these patents are valid, then TechFlex's entire AI kitchen system could be infringing on them." Mrs. Liu finished, eyes wide, "because they're using technology to replicate traditional techniques without preserving the educational element." But we didn't have long to celebrate this revelation. Blake had one more card to play, and it was a nasty one. A news alert popped up on our phones. TechFlex had just announced a partnership with the largest restaurant supply company in the country. Starting next month, all their equipment would come with embedded AI systems that would require licensing under TechFlex's patents. They're trying to force everyone into their ecosystem, David realized. If you want to buy new equipment, you'll have to use their technology. The implications were staggering. Small family restaurants already operating on thin margins couldn't afford to keep using their old equipment forever. Eventually, they'd have to upgrade, and when they did, they're playing long game. Master Zhang nodded. "No need to force anyone if they can just wait." That's when Nai, who'd been quietly cooking through all of this, spoke up. "Then we don't wait. We teach now." She pointed to the mountain of prep work we'd stress-cooked earlier. "All this food, we use it. Host biggest cooking class city has ever seen." Jenny was already on her phone, eyes lighting up. "The video of Master Zhang teaching that kid has over 1 million views now. What if we invited everyone who shared their family cooking stories to come learn in person? Show the world that real cooking isn't about perfect replication. It's about passing down knowledge." "Better idea," David added. "We do it simultaneously at all Golden Palace locations. 50 restaurants, 50 masterclasses, all live-streamed. Show everyone what real heritage preservation looks like." Master Zhang nodded approvingly, but then his expression turned serious. "Must be careful, though. Blake not finished yet. Man who tries to own tradition. Very dangerous when cornered." As if on cue, an email arrived from TechFlex's legal team. The subject line made my blood run cold. "Emergency injunction filed. Cease and desist all culinary education activities." There's an old Chinese saying about the most dangerous moment being when you think you've won. TechFlex's injunction wasn't just a legal threat. It was a declaration of war against every family restaurant trying to preserve their heritage. The injunction was brutal in its scope. They weren't just trying to stop our cooking classes. They wanted to prevent any restaurant from teaching traditional techniques without licensing their AI system. Their argument? That any form of systematic culinary education now fell under their patents. They're trying to patent teaching itself, Mrs. Liu said, pacing our dining room with the legal documents in hand. This goes beyond recipes or techniques. They're claiming ownership of the entire process of passing down culinary knowledge. But Blake had underestimated one crucial factor: the power of grandmothers who've been told they can't teach their grandchildren how to cook. It started with a video from Mrs. Chen, our longtime customer who ran the flower shop down the street. She posted herself teaching her granddaughter how to make rice balls, with a caption that became our battle cry: "Try to stop this, TechFlex." The response was immediate and overwhelming. Thousands of similar videos flooded social media. Parents, grandparents, and children cooking together, sharing stories, passing down traditions, each one tagged with "Try to stop this" and "Each cooking is caring." Master Zhang watched these videos with growing satisfaction. See, they think they fight restaurant, but they fight every family, every memory, every story told through food. That's when Mike had an idea that changed everything. What if we didn't fight the injunction? What if we went around it? He pulled out his laptop, showing us a concept that made my jaw drop. We can't host formal cooking classes? Fine. We turn the Golden Wok into a living museum of culinary arts. People don't come for lessons. They come to observe cultural preservation in action. Jenny caught on immediately, and every Golden Palace location becomes a satellite exhibit. We're not teaching, we're demonstrating historical techniques for educational purposes. David was already making calls to his restaurant managers. Within hours, we had 50 locations ready to transform into cultural heritage sites. But we needed something more, something that would show exactly what we were fighting to preserve. That's when Master Zhang revealed yet another surprise from his seemingly bottomless notebook. "Time to show final teaching of your grandfather," he said, pulling out a series of photographs I'd never seen before. They showed my grandfather teaching a group of children, but in a way I'd never imagined. Each child had a small wok modified with special markers, training wheels for future chefs. The photos were dated 1965, proving that he'd been developing his teaching system long before modern AI was even dreamed of. Your grandfather understood that future of cooking, not in replacing human touch, but in helping new hands learn old wisdom, Master Zhang explained. These tools, not for making perfect food, for making perfect teachers. We were scanning the photos when Mrs. Liu burst in, waving her phone. "You need to see this." Someone leaked internal TechFlex emails. The emails revealed something shocking. TechFlex's AI wasn't just analyzing recipes, it was scanning social media for videos of home cooks, learning from the very traditions they were trying to control. Every grandma's dumpling technique, every family's secret sauce. Their AI was watching, learning, and claiming ownership. "They're not preserving tradition," David said, disgust clear in his voice. "They're stealing it, one family video at a time." The leak went viral. TechFlex steals memories started trending. But it was what happened next that really turned the tide. An anonymous group of tech workers, calling themselves Code for Culture, released a bombshell. They'd analyzed TechFlex's AI system and found it was fundamentally flawed. The algorithm could copy movements and measurements, but it couldn't understand context, the very thing that made traditional cooking special. System failure rate increases 200% when dealing with variables like humidity, ingredient freshness, or emotional state of cook, their report stated. In attempting to standardize tradition, TechFlex has stripped it of its essential adaptive qualities. Master Zhang nodded sagely. "Cannot put soul in box, cannot teach love through wire. This is what your grandfather knew, what his patents protect, the human heart of cooking. We were about to launch our living museum plan when Blake made his most desperate move yet. TechFlex announced they were buying the company that manufactured 80% of professional kitchen equipment in Asia. Their message was clear: resist us, and you'll lose access to the tools you need to survive. But as we stared at this new threat, Nai calmly walked to our storage room and emerged with something that made Master Zhang's eyes light up. A collection of ancient woks, each bearing the same mysterious markings as our family's treasured ones. Your grandfather, she said with a sly smile, was not only one who planned for future, did something more, something that would show exactly what we were fighting to preserve. The thing about family secrets is that they have a way of surfacing, exactly when you need them most. As Nai laid out the collection of ancient woks on our prep table, Master Zhang's hands trembled with recognition. Impossible, he whispered, running his fingers over the marked patterns. These are from Original Circle. Original Circle, I asked, watching as he examined each wok with growing excitement. In 1950s, group of master chefs saw modernization coming, he explained. New traditional cooking at risk. Your grandfather was youngest member. They created network. Each master chef took apprentices, passed down not just recipes, but special tools. Tools marked like these. Nai nodded, a hint of mischief in her eyes. Why you think I marry your grandfather? His handsome face? No, I was apprentice in Shanghai. Recognized his wok marks, knew he was part of Circle. This revelation hit me like a splash of hot oil. You mean there are more? More chefs with tools like ours? Many more, Master Zhang confirmed. Network spread across Asia, then to America. With immigrants, each master passing down knowledge, each student becoming master, like underground railroad of cooking wisdom. Jenny was already on her phone, eyes wide. Guys, check this out. She showed us social media posts popping up from restaurants across the country. Photos of woks, cleavers, even steamers, all bearing similar marks to ours. The Original Circle's network was still alive, and they were responding to our crisis. Mike, ever the tech whiz, noticed something in the marks. These aren't just decorative, he said, mapping them on his laptop. They're a kind of analog code. Each set of marks contains information about cooking techniques, but also about the tools, relationship to others in the network. Mrs. Liu grabbed her legal papers. This changes everything. If we can prove this network predates TechFlex's patents by decades and that it represents an organized system of culinary education. But before she could finish, our phones buzzed. Simultaneously, TechFlex had just announced a press conference. Blake appeared on screen, looking more smug than usual in what appeared to be a chef's jacket rather than his signature turtleneck. We understand the concerns about preserving traditional cooking methods, he said, his voice dripping with fake sincerity. That's why we're excited to announce our new Heritage Integration Program. Any restaurant using our AI system will receive certification as an authentic cultural cuisine provider. David, watching beside me, snorted. They're trying to redefine what counts as authentic, Blake continued. Furthermore, we're partnering with several cultural organizations to establish standards for traditional cuisine preparation. Soon, only AI-certified kitchens will be able to claim authentic status. The implications were chilling. They weren't just trying to control how food was cooked, they were trying to control what counted as traditional cooking itself. But then something unexpected happened. As Blake was speaking, an elderly woman walked onto the stage. My heart nearly stopped when I recognized her. Madame Wu, one of the most respected Chinese chefs in America. Blake's smile widened. We're honored to announce that legendary chef Madame Wu has joined our advisory board, but Madame Wu had other plans. She stepped up to the microphone and held up an ancient wok, its surface bearing the same distinctive marks as ours. You want to talk about authentic, she said, her voice firm. These marks tell story of 5 generations of chefs in my family. Each scratch, each dent, they are notes in symphony of flavors passed down through time. Your machines can copy notes but cannot understand music. The press conference dissolved into chaos. Other chefs in the audience stood up, holding their own marked tools. The original circle was revealing itself, showing that traditional cooking wasn't just about individual recipes or restaurants. It was a living, breathing network of knowledge. Master Zhang watched this unfold with tears in his eyes. Your grandfather would be so proud. Circle remains unbroken, but our victory celebration was premature. Blake's next move was to announce that TechFlex had filed for an immediate court order to protect their intellectual property from a coordinated attack by competitors. They're trying to shut down the entire network, Mrs. Liu warned. If they succeed, any restaurant displaying these traditional marks could be forced to remove them. That's when Nai did something completely unexpected. She walked to our front window and hung a simple sign: "Today's special Revolution soup, recipe older than your patents." "Well, what are you doing?" I asked. She smiled. "Making tomorrow's history today. Call everyone. Tonight we cook." Have you ever seen a revolution start with a bowl of soup? Within hours of Nai hanging that sign, photos of it had gone viral. By sunset, restaurants across the city were posting their own versions. Democracy dumplings, no AI required, freedom fried rice, human-made since 1962, Liberty longevity noodles, certified by Grandma. The Golden Wok's dining room was packed, but not with our usual dinner crowd. Every table was filled with chefs, their marked tools laid out like badges of honor. Master Zhang moved from table to table, examining each piece, sharing stories, connecting generations of culinary history. "This cleaver," he said, holding up one particularly well-worn specimen, "mark show it was first used in Guangzhou, 1948. See these notches, recipe annotations for perfect fish preparation. Not measurements, reminders of feeling, of sound, of smell." Mike was documenting everything, his laptop filling with data about the marks, their meanings, their connections. "It's incredible," he said. "These tools aren't just cookware. They're a physical database of cooking knowledge passed down through generations." But TechFlex wasn't about to let this grassroots resistance go unchallenged. Their lawyers filed for an immediate restraining order, claiming our gathering was an organized attempt to circumvent patent protections. That's when David proved his worth again. He'd quietly been reaching out to his contacts in the restaurant industry, and now Golden Palace locations across the country were opening their doors to local chefs with marked tools. The revolution wasn't just in San Mateo anymore, it was nationwide. Jenny's social media feed was exploding with videos from these gatherings. In New York, a Vietnamese PHO master showed how his family's marked pot helped calculate broth clarity based on weather conditions. In Houston, a Mexican abuela demonstrated how her marked comal taught proper tortilla technique through touch and sound. They're not just sharing recipes, Mrs. Liu realized watching the feeds. They're documenting an entire alternative system of culinary education that predates modern technology. But it was what happened next that really turned the tide. As we were cataloging tools and stories, an elderly Japanese chef approached Master Zhang, bowing deeply. "Honorable Zhang Sensei," he said, "I believe this belongs to the circle." He unwrapped a package to reveal an ancient notebook, its pages filled with diagrams similar to those in Master Zhang's collection. "Kobayashi-san," Master Zhang breathed. "Your father's notes." The notebook, it turned out, contained detailed records of the original circle's formation, including signatures and dates from founding members. More importantly, it documented their teaching system, a sophisticated method of marking tools, to create a distributed network of culinary knowledge. This proves the circle's system isn't just about recipes, Mrs. Liu said excitedly. It's a complete educational methodology that predates computerization. TechFlex isn't innovating. They're trying to digitize a system that already exists. The energy in the room shifted as word spread about the notebook. Chefs began sharing more than just their tools. They brought out old photos, letters, documentation of how the circle had preserved cooking traditions through wars, migrations, and cultural revolutions. Nai watched all this with quiet satisfaction, still cooking her revolution soup. The aroma filled the restaurant, drawing people to the kitchen where she worked with deliberate grace. "What's in it?" someone finally asked. "Everything," she replied with a wink, "and nothing. Recipe changes with each bowl, adapts to each person. Something no machine can copy." As if to prove her point, when she served the soup, each bowl somehow reminded people of their own grandmother's cooking, regardless of their cultural background. The magic wasn't in specific ingredients or techniques, it was in the wisdom of knowing how to cook for the soul. But just as we thought we were gathering momentum, Blake made his boldest move yet. TechFlex announced they were partnering with the World Culinary Federation to establish digital authentication standards for traditional cooking. Any restaurant not using their AI system would be labeled non-authentic in global restaurant databases and delivery apps. They're trying to rewrite the definition of authentic cuisine, David said, his face dark with anger. If they succeed, the traditional methods could be labeled as uncertified or even unsafe. That's when Master Zhang stood up, commanding attention without raising his voice. "They think they fight for future of food," he said, looking around at the gathered chefs. "But we are not past fighting to survive. We are future they fear, future where wisdom flows not through wires, but through hearts and hands." He raised Nai's bowl of revolution soup. "Tonight, we show world that real tradition is not dead thing to preserve in digital amber, is living force that grows stronger with each generation." As if in response, our phones lit up with a notification. The Code for Culture group had just released another bombshell about TechFlex's AI system. And this one could change everything. You know that moment when you realize the biggest threat isn't what you thought it was? The Code for Culture revelation hit like that. Mike's hands were shaking as he read the report aloud to our gathered crowd of chefs. TechFlex's AI isn't just analyzing cooking techniques, he explained. It's systematically erasing cultural variations. The algorithm is programmed to identify what it calls optimal methods, discarding what it considers inefficient deviations, which usually means traditional techniques that don't fit its standardized model. The whistleblowers had uncovered internal documents showing TechFlex's true endgame. They weren't trying to preserve cultural heritage, they were trying to homogenize it, create a single, standardized version of each dish that could be mass-produced, without the inconsistencies of human touch. "Look at this," Jenny said, projecting their data onto our dining room wall. When their AI analyzes different families' versions of the same dish, it doesn't preserve the variations, it eliminates them. Every family's slightly different dumpling fold, every regional spice variation, every secret ingredient passed down through generations, all reduced to a single optimal version. Master Zhang picked up one of the marked woks, running his fingers over its ancient patterns. "They do not understand. These marks, each tells story of adaptation. How recipe changed as families moved, as ingredients changed, as new generations added their own wisdom. This is not inefficiency. This is evolution of culture itself." That's when Mrs. Liu noticed something crucial in the leaked documents. The patent applications. They're not just for the cooking methods. They're trying to patent the concept of culinary standardization itself. If these patents are approved, they could potentially claim ownership of any attempt to systematize cooking techniques. David, who'd been quietly making calls to his restaurant industry contacts, looked up from his phone. It's worse than that. Some major restaurant chains are already implementing what they're calling heritage compliance standards. If you want to be listed as serving authentic cultural cuisine, you'll need to prove your methods match TechFlex's approved patterns. The room erupted in angry discussions, but Nai's voice cut through the chaos. Then we show them true meaning of heritage. She turned to Master Zhang. Time to open final page? Master Zhang nodded solemnly. From his notebook he withdrew a folded paper that looked older than any we'd seen yet. Your grandfather, he said to me, was not just member of Original Circle. He was visionary. He saw this day coming. The paper contained drawings unlike anything we'd seen before, not just cooking instructions or tool markings, but a complete philosophy of culinary evolution. It showed how traditional techniques could adapt and grow while maintaining their cultural essence, how innovation could serve tradition rather than replace it. Look here, Master Zhang pointed to a series of diagrams. System for teaching not just how, but why. Not just technique, but wisdom. Each mark on tool tells not only what to do, but how to think about what you do. Mike's eyes widened as he studied the drawings. This isn't just a teaching system. It's a framework for preserving cultural knowledge while allowing it to evolve naturally. The exact opposite of what TechFlex is trying to do. But before we could fully process this revelation, our phones buzzed with breaking news. TechFlex had just announced a partnership with the largest restaurant supply chain in Asia. Starting next month, all new kitchen equipment would come with their AI systems pre-installed. The message was clear. Adapt to their standard or be left behind. That's when something unexpected happened. One of the younger chefs, who'd been quietly observing until now, stepped forward. She worked at a fusion restaurant downtown, blending Korean and Mexican cuisines. You know what TechFlex doesn't understand? She said, pulling out her own marked tools, modern ones, but bearing variations of the traditional patterns. These marks aren't just about preserving the past. They're about building bridges to the future. My grandmother taught me Korean techniques. My mentor taught me Mexican ones, and these marks helped me understand how they could work together. That's real innovation. Other young chefs began sharing similar stories. The marks weren't just preserving old techniques. They were helping create new ones, guiding the respectful fusion of different culinary traditions. Master Zhang beamed with pride. This is what Circle always meant to be. Not museum of old ways, but living garden where traditions grow together, strengthen each other. But our moment of revelation was interrupted by the sound of sirens outside. Through the window, we could see police cars pulling up, and behind them, a familiar Tesla. Blake stepped out, holding what looked like a court order. His smile was colder than ever. "Time's up," he called through the door. "By order of the federal court, this gathering is now officially shut down." Ever notice how the most important moments often happen over food? As Blake stood outside with his court order, something remarkable was happening inside the Golden Wok. Instead of panicking, every chef in the room calmly picked up their tools and started cooking. "What are you doing?" I whispered to Master Zhang, who was calmly heating his wok. "They're here to shut us down," he smiled, not even looking up from his work. "Best way to fight order stopping us from cooking? Keep cooking." The police officers entered first, followed by Blake and his legal team. But instead of the resistance they expected, they found themselves walking into what looked like the world's most impressive impromptu food festival. "This is a legally sanctioned closure," Blake started, but his voice trailed off as the aromas hit him. Every burner was lit, every surface covered with preparation for dishes I'd never even seen before. Mrs. Liu stepped forward, legal papers in hand. "Actually, you might want to read the fine print of your own court order. It prohibits unauthorized sharing of protected culinary techniques." But these chefs aren't sharing techniques. They're individually practicing their personal family traditions. You can't ban people from cooking their own heritage? Blake's face reddened. The order clearly states, shows no jurisdiction over private cultural expression, Mrs. Liu interrupted, unless TechFlex is now claiming ownership of personal family. Traditions? The police officers looked uncertainly between Blake and the room full of cooking chefs. One of them, an older officer, was particularly distracted by an elderly Thai chef making something that smelled exactly like what his grandmother used to cook. That's when Jenny's livestream hit critical mass. Indri cooking is not a crime was trending worldwide, with millions watching our restaurant full of defiant chefs practicing their art. Comments poured in from around the globe, many sharing their own family recipes and traditions. But it was what happened next that really changed the game. The young fusion chef who'd spoken earlier stepped up to Blake, holding a steaming bowl. "Try this," she said simply. "I'm not here to—" "Afraid?" Master Zhang asked quietly. "Afraid to taste food made by human hands with human heart?" Maybe it was the cameras, maybe it was the challenge in Master Zhang's voice, but Blake took the bowl. The room held its breath as he tasted it. Something flickered across his face, surprise, then something deeper, recognition. This tastes like— He stopped, struggling with some memory. "Like the congee your Chinese neighbor used to make when you were sick as a kid?" the young chef asked. "The one who taught you your first Mandarin words?" Blake's mask slipped for just a moment. "How did you—" "I didn't. The food did. Real cooking doesn't just feed the body, it reads the soul, something your AI can never do." Then Nai did something unexpected. She walked up to Blake, took his arm, and led him to our prep station. "You want to understand what you fight against? Then learn. Not with papers, not with computers, with hands." To everyone's surprise, she started teaching him how to fold dumplings. More surprisingly, he didn't resist. "Feel dough," she instructed. "Too wet? Add flour. Too dry? Add water. But how much? No measuring cup tells you. Only fingers know." As Blake struggled with the dumpling wrapper, something remarkable happened. Other chefs began sharing their own family techniques, not in protest, but in genuine desire to teach. The police officers, drawn in by the atmosphere, found themselves learning too. "This is what Original Circle really about," Master Zhang explained, watching the scene unfold. "Not just preserving recipes, but connecting people through food. Every mark on these tools tells story of someone teaching, someone learning, someone sharing piece of their heart." David, who'd been quietly filming everything, turned to Mrs. Liu. "Please tell me this helps our legal case." She was already typing furiously on her phone. "Better." The leaked documents showed TechFlex claiming their AI could perfectly replicate traditional cooking. This proves it can't. They're not just wrong, they're fraudulent. But while everyone was focused on the cooking lesson, Mike noticed something on his laptop that made his blood run cold. "Guys," he called out, "TechFlex just pushed a system update to all their AI kitchen units. They're activating something called Protocol Heritage Lock." On screens around the restaurant, we could see reports flooding in. Every TechFlex-enabled kitchen device was shutting down, displaying the same message. "Non-compliant cooking techniques detected. System locked for heritage protection." They weren't just trying to stop us anymore, they were trying to stop everyone. You know those moments when a situation goes from bad to apocalyptic? As reports of locked kitchen equipment flooded in, we realized TechFlex hadn't just crossed a line. They'd declared war on every restaurant that wasn't playing by their rules. "Restaurants across the country are going dark," Jenny reported, scrolling through her feed. "Any kitchen using TechFlex enabled. Equipment is locked out unless they agree to their new heritage compliance terms." Blake, still standing at our prep station with half-folded dumpling in hand, looked as surprised as anyone. "This wasn't supposed to happen yet," he muttered, reaching for his phone. But before he could make a call, Master Zhang placed a hand on his arm. "Tell truth," the old chef said quietly. "This not what you wanted when you started, yes? To lock away cooking itself?" Something in Blake's expression cracked. The algorithm was supposed to preserve traditions, not cage them. But the board, they saw the profit potential in controlling access to authentic cooking. Money men never understand soul of food. Nine nodded sagely, still showing him how to pinch the dumpling edges. "But you understand little bit now, yes? Feel how dumpling skin tells you when it ready to close." Before Blake could respond, David burst in with urgent news. "It's worse than we thought. The lock isn't just affecting restaurants. It's hitting our culinary schools, community centers, anywhere using modern kitchen equipment. They're essentially holding the entire food service industry hostage." That's when Mike, who'd been furiously typing away, made a discovery that changed everything. "The Heritage Lock has a fatal flaw," he announced. "It's based on their AI's definition of authentic cooking methods. But look at this code. It can't actually distinguish between traditional techniques and random variations. It's just pattern matching against its database." The young fusion chef's eyes lit up. "So if we introduced enough variations, we could overload the system," Mike finished. "Show that their whole premise of standardized tradition is fundamentally flawed." Master Zhang. You pulled out his notebook again, turning to a page we hadn't seen before. "Your grandfather predicted this too," he said. "Not machines exactly, but attempt to cage cooking in rigid rules. Look here. System for teaching infinite variations while keeping soul of dish intact." The diagrams showed how a single traditional technique could spawn countless variations, each preserving the essential spirit while adapting to new circumstances. It wasn't just about cooking, it was about evolution itself. That's when Nai did something remarkable. She gathered all the young chefs around her station. "Each take dumpling wrapper," she instructed. "Now fold your way. Not my way, not traditional way, your way. But remember feeling of dough, respect soul of ingredient." What happened next was extraordinary. Each chef created their own variation of the dumpling fold, influenced by their cultural background and personal style. Some incorporated techniques from other cuisines, others invented completely new approaches. But somehow, each dumpling still carried the essence of what made it special. Jenny livestreamed the whole thing, calling it the Dakichi Dumpling Revolution. Chefs around the world began sharing their own variations, overwhelming TechFlex's AI with more patterns than it could process. The Heritage Lock system started glitching, unable to determine what was authentic when faced with endless creative variations that still respected traditional principles. Blake watched all this unfold, his face a mixture of emotions. Finally, he took out his phone again, but not to call his office. Instead, he started recording. "I need to show you something," he said, leading us to his Tesla's tablet. He pulled up TechFlex's original AI development logs. The system wasn't built to standardize cooking. It was designed to learn from it, to understand how traditions evolve. But somewhere along the way, money men made it into cage. Master Zhang finished. David, who'd been coordinating with other Golden Palace locations, suddenly rushed in with news that made everyone freeze. TechFlex's board is holding an emergency meeting. They're voting on whether to activate something called Protocol Zero. Mike's face went pale as he found the protocol details in the leaked files. They're going to brick every piece of equipment in their network permanently, unless every restaurant agrees to their complete control of culinary standards, Mrs. Liu finished grimly. Blake stared at his phone, then at the room full of chefs, still creating their unique dumplings. Finally, he looked at the half-finished dumpling in his own hands, imperfect, but somehow more real than anything his AI had ever produced. "I think," he said slowly, "it's time I attended that board meeting. Ever wonder what it feels like to watch the fate of thousands of restaurants unfold in real time? Thanks to Blake's tablet, which he'd accidentally left logged into TechFlex's board meeting video feed, we were about to find out. The scene in our kitchen was surreal. Dozens of chefs huddled around the screen, still cooking as they watched, because as Nai said, worried hands need dough to hold. Master Zhang stood in front, translating the corporate doublespeak for everyone. They speak of preserving heritage, he scoffed, but mean preserving control. On screen, TechFlex's board members looked like they'd stepped out of a corporate villain casting call. The CEO, a woman named Victoria Sterling, was particularly impressive in her steel grey suit and perfectly practiced concern. The Heritage Lock Protocol has achieved its intended effect, she announced. 70% of affected restaurants have already agreed to our compliance terms. Once Protocol 0 is activated, the remainder will have no choice but to follow. That's when Blake made his entrance, still wearing his flour-dusted clothes from our kitchen. A murmur went through the boardroom. Their golden boy was definitely off script. Before we vote, he said, holding up something that made us all gasp. One of our marked woks. I need to show you what we're actually destroying. He placed the wok on the boardroom's glossy table, its ancient marks a stark contrast to the modern surroundings. Our AI can't replicate these traditions because we fundamentally misunderstand what tradition is. It's not a fixed set of rules. It's a living, breathing conversation between generations. Victoria's perfect smile tightened. Blake, if you're suggesting we abandon months of development, I'm suggesting we've been solving the wrong problem. He pulled out his phone and started playing Jenny's live stream of our kitchen. Look at what's happening right now in kitchens across the country. The screen filled with scenes of the Thatcher dumpling revolution. Countless chefs creating their own variations while honoring traditional principles. Every one of these violations our AI is flagging. They're not bugs in the system of culinary tradition. They're features. They're how cuisine stays alive. But the board members seemed unmoved. Charming, Victoria said coldly, but sentiment doesn't scale. Protocol 0 is designed to... She was interrupted by an alert on every screen in the room. Mike, our tech wizard, had been busy. Actually, his voice came through their speakers, you might want to see what your AI is doing right now. The displays showed TechFlex's AI system having what could only be described as an existential crisis. Faced with the flood of variations from the Dujas dumpling revolution, it was detecting authentic tradition everywhere and nowhere simultaneously. Your algorithm is based on a fundamental misunderstanding, Mike explained. It tries to find one true version of each dish, but that's not how cooking works. The soul of a dish isn't in its standardization, it's in its ability to adapt while maintaining its essence. To demonstrate, he showed side-by-side comparisons, the AI's perfect dumplings versus the thousands of variations being created worldwide. Each variation told a story, fusion cuisines, bridging cultures, adaptations for local ingredients, modifications for dietary needs, all while respecting the core principles of the dish. Furthermore, Mrs. Liu's voice joined in. When did she get patched into their system? We've discovered something interesting about your patents. She shared documents showing the original circle's prior art. Your entire legal premise is built on claiming ownership of standardization, but you can't standardize what's inherently diverse. The boardroom erupted in chaos. Some members were frantically checking stock prices, others arguing about legal exposure. But Victoria remained eerily calm. Touching presentation, she said, but while you've been playing with dumplings, we've been securing our position. She pressed a button, and screens around the world displayed a new message. Protocol 0. Initiating in 60 minutes. That's when Nai, who'd been quietly watching everything while cooking, did something unexpected. She walked to our kitchen's smart display. one of the locked screens, and tapped it 3 times in a pattern that looked suspiciously like the marks on our oldest wok. The screen flickered, then displayed something impossible. Lines of code that looked ancient and modern at the same time, written in the same pattern language as the original circle's tool marks. Master Zhang's eyes widened. "Impossible," he whispered. "The digital circle." "Your grandfather not only one who planned for future," Nai said with a sly smile. "Some of us learn new language for new time." As we watched in amazement, similar patterns began appearing on locked screens across the country. The heritage lock wasn't just failing, it was being transformed. You think you know your family's secrets? Try finding out your grandmother was part of an underground network of tech-savvy chefs who'd been preparing for a digital culinary war for decades. "We knew technology would come for cooking," Nai explained, as her code continued to spread through TechFlex's network. "So some of us learned new way to protect old ways." Master Zhang was still staring at the screens in disbelief. "The markings, they weren't just cooking instructions. Some marks teach cooking," Nai nodded. "Others teach different kind of recipe for freedom. Every pattern can be translated to code. We hide future in past, digital in analog." Mike was frantically analyzing the spreading code. "This is incredible. The marks on the tools. They're not just a teaching system, they're a complete programming language disguised as traditional patterns, and it's more advanced than anything." TechFlex has, on the boardroom screen, Victoria's composure finally cracked. "What are you doing to our system?" "Not destroying," Nai replied calmly. "Freeing. Like good cooking, good technology should serve, not control." The code was transforming TechFlex's locked screens into something new. Instead of demanding compliance, they now offered choices: traditional modes, modern modes, fusion modes, all while maintaining safety protocols but removing artificial restrictions on technique. David, watching the numbers roll in, let out a low whistle. Restaurant systems are coming back online, but differently. They're learning, not trying to control the cooking, but actually learning from the cooks. That's when Blake, still standing in the boardroom with our flour-dusted wok, understood. This is what the AI should have been all along. Not a ruler, but a student. Not a cage, but a bridge. Victoria wasn't giving up. "This is corporate sabotage. Our investors..." "Your investors might be interested in this," Mrs. Liu interrupted, sharing new documents on their screens. "The original Circle's patents don't just cover cooking methods. They include principles of adaptive learning systems. TechFlex's entire AI approach has been infringing on technology that was patented 50 years ago." The boardroom erupted in chaos again, but this time with a different tone. Board members were frantically calling their lawyers. Investors were demanding explanations. Victoria's perfect facade was crumbling, but we had our own crisis to handle. Protocol Zero was still counting down, and despite Nai's code spreading, there were still thousands of restaurants locked out of their equipment. That's when the young fusion chef had an idea. "What if we don't fight the lockdown?" she suggested. "What if we show everyone how to cook without it instead?" Master Zhang's eyes lit up. He turned to the live stream cameras that were still rolling. "Today, we give world most important cooking lesson. How to touch fire, feel food, hear cooking song, without machine telling you what to do." What happened next was like a worldwide cooking flash mob. Chefs everywhere began demonstrating traditional cooking methods that didn't need modern equipment. Wok cooking over portable burners, hand-pulled noodles, knife skills passed down through generations. Jenny's social media feed exploded with videos of grandmothers teaching grandchildren, of family secrets being shared openly, of traditions being preserved through practice rather than preservation. "Look at engagement numbers," she gasped. "People aren't just watching, they're cooking along. The Back to Basics is trending higher than Shaka TechFlex fail." In the boardroom, Blake was showing his own live stream of our kitchen. "This is your choice," he told the board. "You can try to control tradition and fail, or you can help it grow and be part of something revolutionary." Victoria tried one last time. "The shareholders are watching their investment implode," a board member interrupted. "Face it, Victoria, your approach failed. Blake's showing us a better way." That's when Nine-Eye's code reached its final form. Every locked screen displayed a new message. Choose your path, innovation through tradition. The countdown to Protocol Zero stopped. In its place, a new kind of culinary operating system emerged, one that combined the best of old and new, that learned from tradition instead of trying to control it. But just as we thought victory was within reach, every screen suddenly went dark. When they came back on, a new message appeared. Emergency protocol engaged. System reset initiated. Victoria's smile returned, colder than ever. "You didn't think we'd build this without a kill switch, did you? Ever notice how in the movies there's always a secret last resort button that could ruin everything? Turns. Out real-life corporate villains love those too." As Victoria's kill switch took effect, screens across the country started going dark. Not just locked this time, but completely dead. "What did you do?" Blake demanded, watching restaurants worldwide lose control of their equipment. "Insurance policy," Victoria replied smoothly. "The kill switch doesn't just lock the systems, it wipes them completely. No programming, no operating. System, nothing, just empty hardware." Mike was frantically trying to track the damage. "She's right, everything's being erased. Even Nine-Eye's code can't stop it because there's nothing left to run it on." But something strange was happening in our kitchen. While modern equipment everywhere was going dark, our old marked woks started humming with a barely perceptible vibration. Master Zhang placed his hand on one, eyes widening. "Listen," he whispered. "They sing ancient song." Nine-Eye nodded, touching another wok. "Digital circle not only hide code in marks, hide energy too. Each mark store tiny bit of power, like battery, waiting 100 years to wake up." That's when we noticed something extraordinary. The marks on the tools weren't just vibrating. They were glowing faintly, pulsing in patterns that matched the code we'd seen earlier. "Impossible," Victoria breathed, watching through the boardroom camera. "You can't store digital information in analog tools." "Cannot," Nine-Eye smiled. "Tell that to bamboo, tell that to iron that remembers fire's touch. Everything holds memory if you know how to write it." Mike's laptop suddenly lit up. "The marks, they're not just storing code, they're broadcasting it. The metal itself is acting like some kind of analog transmitter." Across the country, chefs with marked tools reported the same phenomenon. The ancient patterns were coming alive, reaching out to the dead modern equipment around them. Slowly, screens started flickering back to life. "It's like the tools are teaching the machines," Jenny observed, watching the patterns spread across her phone's screen. "Just like how the original circle taught new chefs." But Victoria wasn't finished. "This is absurd. You can't defeat modern technology with cooking equipment." "Not defeating," Master Zhang corrected. "Healing. Like good stock brings life. To simple water, old wisdom brings life to new things." David, who'd been coordinating with other Golden Palace locations, suddenly burst in with news. "It's not just restaurants anymore. The patterns are spreading to other systems. Traffic lights, ATMs, even smart home devices. They're all displaying these marks." That's when we understood the true scope of what the original circle had created. It wasn't just a cooking teaching system or even a hidden programming language. It was a way of encoding wisdom itself, of teaching machines how to learn from tradition rather than try to control it. Blake, still standing in the boardroom with our flour-dusted wok, turned to the board members. "Don't you see? We've been approaching this all wrong. We thought tradition was something to capture and control, but it's not about control, it's about connection." The board members watched in amazement as their own screens came back to life, displaying not TechFlex's sleek interface, but something that looked both ancient and futuristic, cooking wisdom encoded in digital form. Victoria made one last desperate move. She pulled out her phone, trying to activate some final failsafe, but before she could, something remarkable happened. The phone's screen displayed a pattern that looked exactly like the mark for patience on our oldest wok. Your own device learns, Nai said softly. Question is, do you? The tension in both rooms, our kitchen and their boardroom, was electric. Everyone waited to see what Victoria would do. After what felt like an eternity, she slowly lowered her phone. How? She asked, and for the first time, there was genuine curiosity in her voice. How did you encode all this into cookware? Master Zhang smiled. Same way we teach cooking. Little by little, day by day, each generation adding own wisdom, but keeping core truth. Digital circle just add new language to old story. But just as victory seemed within reach, alarms started blaring. Mike's face went pale as he checked his laptop. The kill switch, he said. It wasn't just erasing systems, it was triggering a hardware overload. Every piece of TechFlex equipment is about to... He didn't need to finish. We could feel the heat building in every smart device around us. We had minutes, maybe seconds, before everything literally melted down. They say in the kitchen, timing is everything. As the heat from overloading equipment filled the air, we had seconds to prevent a technological meltdown that would destroy not just our restaurant, but thousands of others worldwide. The kill switch isn't just erasing, it's overloading every circuit, every processor. Mike explained frantically. These systems weren't designed to handle this kind of power surge. That's when Nai did something completely unexpected. She walked calmly to our oldest wok, the one with the most intricate markings, and placed her hand on its surface. Time to wake up oldest song, she said softly. Master Zhang's eyes widened in recognition. The cooling pattern. But that is only legend. All legends have truth at heart, she replied, her fingers tracing a complex sequence of marks. As she did, the wok began to hum with a different frequency, deeper, more resonant. Through the boardroom feed, we could see the TechFlex executives backing away from their overheating equipment. Victoria stood frozen, watching her perfect system literally self-destruct. What's happening? Blake asked, holding our flour-dusted wok that was now vibrating with the same frequency as Nai's. Original circle, not just teach cooking, Master Zhang explained. Teach balance. Every pattern for heat has partner pattern for cooling, like yin and yang, push and pull, taste and aftertaste. The humming spread from wok to wok, tool to tool. Across the country, marked implements began resonating with the same cooling frequency. The pattern wasn't just a programming language. It was a way of managing energy itself. It's working, Mike exclaimed, watching temperature readings drop on his laptop. The pattern is creating some kind of harmonic resonance that's bleeding off the excess energy. But we weren't safe yet. The overload had progressed too far in some systems. That's when the young fusion chef had an idea that could only come from someone who understood both tradition and innovation. If the marks can transmit energy, she said, grabbing her modern wok with its adapted patterns, then maybe we can update the cooling song for modern hardware. She started incorporating new movements into Nai's pattern, creating a bridge between old and new. Other chefs caught on, each adding their own variations while maintaining the core rhythm. Through screens worldwide, we could see the effect rippling out. The deadly heat was being transformed, redirected, repurposed. In some places, it even became useful. Ovens maintained perfect temperatures. Refrigeration units ran more efficiently. Victoria, watching her kill switch transform from weapon to tool, finally understood. It was never about controlling the process, she said quietly. It was about finding the balance. Balance is everything, Nai agreed. In cooking, in technology, in life, no good comes from too much control. As the crisis subsided, something beautiful emerged. The marriage of ancient wisdom and modern innovation had created something entirely new. Restaurant kitchens worldwide now had systems that truly learned from tradition rather than trying to cage it. Blake, still standing in the boardroom, turned to his fellow executives. This is what we should have been building all along. Not a replacement for human wisdom, but a bridge to help it grow. The board's vote was unanimous. Victoria stepped down, and Blake was appointed to lead TechFlex's new Culinary Heritage Innovation Division, with the requirement that he continue his dumpling-making lessons. But the real victory wasn't in the boardroom. It was in kitchens. Everywhere, where the original circle's marks now coexisted with digital displays, each teaching and learning from the other. The patterns became a new standard, not for restriction, but for growth. Master Zhang watched it all with satisfied tears in his eyes. "Your grandfather would be so proud," he told me. "He saw future where old and new danced together, like ingredients in perfect dish." David transformed all 50 Golden Palace locations into learning centers, where traditional techniques and modern innovation worked hand in hand. The restaurants became bridges between generations, cultures, and technologies. As for the Golden Wok, well, we still serve the best dumplings in San Mateo, but now our kitchen is something more, a living museum where the past and future meet, where every meal tells a story of tradition, adapting and growing stronger. Nai still teaches, dumpling folding to anyone who wants to learn, though now her lessons include both ancient wisdom and modern insights. Every dumpling different, she always says, just like every cook different. That is not bug in system, that is feature. The original circle and its digital descendants continue to grow, a living network of culinary wisdom that adapts and evolves while keeping its soul intact. Our marked tools still hum occasionally, singing their ancient songs into the digital age, reminding us that true innovation doesn't replace tradition, it helps it thrive. And sometimes, late at night when the kitchen is quiet, you can still hear the harmonics of old and new resonating together, cooking up whatever comes next. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them. Out!